Wasabi guys, welcome back to another video where I cover one of my favorite commander cards. This time we're going to be doing something a little bit different. The first time I'm going to be doing this, covering an actual commander. So if the video is a little bit longer, that's why. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to this commander. Arguably one of my most favorite, if not my most favorite commander. And we're talking, of course, about Prossh Skyraider of Care. He is 6 mana in Jund colors for a 5/5 flying dragon. And he has, whenever you cast him, you get X01 red kobold creature tokens, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast him. He also has Sacrifice Another Creature, and Prossh gets +1/+0 until end of turn, so it's basically a nod to Shivan Dragon in a way. He's also a 5/5 dragon with a fire-breathing effect. However, that one is significantly worse because you have to pay mana to make it work. Beyond just that comparison right there, this guy is just incredibly well-rounded. Back when I first started playing Commander, right around Commander 2013, about when this guy was released, with other commanders such as Derevi, Imperial Tactician, and Oloro, Ageless Ascetic. Sort of the theme here was some sort of busted interaction with the command zone. Now those two commanders, you obviously had Oloro with the life gain, not even having to play him an entire game, and suddenly you would have accumulated like 20 life, or even more than that. And with Derevi, you had the awesomeness of just having to pay 4 mana to play her whenever the hell you wanted to. So that was a huge bonus there with her. But when I first started playing, and I looked at this guy, I honestly thought he sucked. I didn't think he was that great. I just thought he was basically a Shivan Dragon. I was quick to dismiss him and go with other commanders such as Derevi and Oloro because to me, looking at them at face value, they just seemed a lot more powerful. Now, as I've been playing this format for the past 4 years, I can tell you that Prossh might actually be one of the most well-rounded, if not the most well-rounded commander in the entire format. Not only this, but the fact that he is honestly, in my opinion, one of the strongest, if not the strongest, commander outside of blue. I'm obviously going to have to back that up with some evidence, so let me just go ahead and start off by saying this. He is a free sack outlet. If we compare him to another commander, I like calling him his predecessor, but that's essentially what Gave Guru of Spores is, at least to me. Another commander that works out pretty well with tokens, however, he also works well with +1/+1 counters. That's the main difference here, and he's also an Abzan. So the fact, though, that you have to pay 1 generic mana to actually sacrifice a creature is significantly worse than just being able to sacrifice a creature for free, which is what Prossh allows you to do. Not only this, but every time you recast Gave Guru of Spores, you don't actually get more +1/+1 counters on him. Whereas with Prossh, each time you recast him, you get more 0/1 red kobold tokens. So effectively what you have here is a commander that you can be a little bit more reckless with. And many times you'll find that he is very disposable as a commander, meaning you can sacrifice him to other sack outlets, you can have him get killed in combat, stuff like that, and you're perfectly fine with it because all you want to do is just recast him and get more tokens. So just the comparison there to one of his predecessors, who really has fallen off a bit. I don't think Gave Guru of Spores isn't as strong as a commander. There's just too much has to go right for that deck to really work. With Prossh, all you really need is maybe something like a Peril of Lives, and you don't even need that because there's so many awesome sack trigger related cards. There's so many ETB related cards that work out pretty well. So let's go on to the other fact about Prossh here, and that is it's on a cast trigger. You get these little tokens on a cast trigger, so very similar to the Eldrazi, which is one thing that so many people, especially new players, get wrong in this format, is that when they go to counterspell something like a Prossh or an Eldrazi, they think that that just counters it outright, when in fact, when you cast it and there's an effect that triggers off the cast, call that a cast trigger, you get those tokens regardless of whether or not Prossh himself resolves. That's another thing, is that it's almost pointless to just counter him, because what you want to do in a Prossh deck is just recast him and get more tokens, so you might as well just let him resolve because he's going to get the tokens anyway. If anything, you're only going to counter him if you're that low in life and they have a haste enabler. So let's just go into what cards just work out pretty well. Let's just get the obvious out of the way here. In a deck like this, something like Food Chain is just incredibly powerful, and likely will go infinite. And if you have any sort of damage triggers on ETB, you're likely going to win the game on the spot if you have Food Chain out and you have Prosh. Because all you really have to do is just exile Prosh, have him sent to the command zone, because it's one of those exiling effects that doesn't really care about the zones afterwards. So you get the mana equal to a CMC +1, so that's 7 mana right there, in addition to maybe exiling 1 or 2 kobolds, and you get to just recast them over and over again. You get more kobolds, so that's more mana you can get off the Food Chain. And if you do have ETB triggers like Purphoros, God of the Forge, who's another great card and just a very good option to have in this deck as well, you're likely going to win the game. Now, in addition to this, since this is also green, why not just play Craterhoof Behemoth? Incredibly powerful option in green. Use something like an Eldritch Evolution, sacrifice Prosh, get something 8 or less out of your deck, which is going to be Craterhoof most of the time. You have a ton of tokens, they just get insanely powerful, and they have trample too, so why the hell not play this? Incredibly powerful. And we also have Grave Pact effects, which is something that you can also do, as well as Dictate of Erebos and Butcher of Malakir. So you also get that little bit of a control aspect into this deck, which not a lot of people bring up when they talk about Prosh, so you can also take advantage of that, force your opponents to sacrifice a ton of their creatures, because hey, you likely have a ton of these little kobolds that you can sacrifice. Most of your opponents aren't going to have as many creatures as you do, so you likely have shut them down. And also, hey, why not play other things that interact with sack triggers? Something like a Blood Artist. You could also play Falconwrath Noble, something that does pretty much the same thing. Also Zulaport Cutthroat. But we also have things like Deathbringer Thoktar, which is one of my personal favorite cards in the deck. Basically, you can just save up all these +1/+1 counters on them, and if your opponent wants to do something dumb in response, you can just ping them to death. But we also have other sack outlets that we can take advantage of, such as Ashnod's Altar and even Phyrexian Altar if we want to take advantage of just getting more mana. As well as things like Goblin Bombardment, very similar to a Deathbringer Thoktar. Basically just wait for your opponent to do something stupid and then sacrifice all your tokens and just ping them for a ton of damage. That's basically what you want to do with those types of cards. Just save up your whole team, and if your opponent tries to board wipe, well hey, they had it coming to them anyway. So just a lot of versatility here, and we're not even talking about the other way you could play this deck, which is going big, because not only is Prosh good if you want to go wide, he's incredibly good if you want to do that, but you can also go pretty big too, because he also has the fire breathing effect for sacrificing creatures. So you can throw in something like Xenagos, God of Revels, and make him just way bigger than he normally is, especially if you want to sacrifice the tokens or whatever you want to sacrifice before you actually get his trigger off during combat. Make him twice as big, likely deal commander damage, and kill someone off that way. So you can make sort of like a Voltron build with him too. It's not terrible. Obviously the best way, and the way that I play him, and the way I would recommend you guys play him, is with tokens and taking advantage of sack triggers, taking advantage of ETB triggers such as Purphoros. You could also throw in an Impact Tremors, something like that. And there are also some other win cons that you can throw in too, such as Vicious Shadows, where you can take advantage of your opponent's hand size by sacrificing creatures and dealing damage to them equal to the number of cards they have in their hand. That's also pretty nice. But overall, Prosh is just incredibly powerful, whether you want to make it a heavy combat-based deck, or whether you want to win by sack triggers or ETB triggers, or if you just want to win by commander damage. You can't really go wrong. There's so many different directions. He differentiates himself pretty well from other commanders in this format, especially some of the older ones. It kind of furthers my viewing of Commander 2013 as a set, especially when you compare it to Commander 2011, or it wasn't called Commander 2011, it was just called Commander. And if you compare it to Commander 2014, 2015, 2016, and now 2017, it just gave you the most powerful commander options overall, I would have to say, especially when you talk about interacting with the command zone. Incentivizing you to have your commander die over and over again just so you get more tokens is incredibly hilarious. The fact that you have other commanders as well that take advantage of their castings, or how long they're in the command zone, such as Oloro getting more life, and just take advantage of that overall. And Commander 2013 just gave you just an insanely powerful arsenal to work with when it comes to commanders, and so many different options. But I think that also goes to show, especially with Prosh, just the versatility that you get with 3 colors. I mean, you get the aggressiveness in red, you get the sack triggers, and you get the Grave Pact effects, and Blood Artist effects in black, and you of course get the huge creature, Craterhoof Behemoth win cons, you get the food chain, get mana, you get all this aggressive ramping in green, and you just get a ton of awesomeness overall when it comes to Jund. It's very well rounded. As far as just being outside of blue though, I mean, you can't really go wrong with Prossh. He has so many different ways that he can win, and he can kill you pretty easily, especially in multiplayer, which is where a lot of these aggressive combat-based decks typically falter, and they don't really do too well. 4-player, 5-player, 6-player multiplayer games where combat doesn't really do that much, where you can't really single out a player without making multiple different enemies. Whereas with Prossh, it's just sort of, hey, I have a ton of tokens, I'm likely going to have so many creatures to where it doesn't really matter. Either that, or I can just win with an alternate win con, such as the ETB sack trigger thing. So incredibly powerful, incredibly versatile. I can't really say enough about this guy. He's honestly one of my favorite commanders, and I highly recommend him, and that's another reason why I want to do this series. People who just don't really know too much about these commanders, and might look at one and take it at face value and sort of just make their assumptions up and say, oh, well, he's not that good, he's basically just another Shivan Dragon, like I did back when I first started playing this format. But building a deck and just taking the time to build a deck around your commander, you really get to know the ins and outs of it. You really know what makes your commander tick and how it really works, especially when you play in a multiplayer format. So anyway guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you give Prossh Skyraider of Kher a chance if you haven't already. I know he's very popular and a lot of people already know what he does, but this is more or less just to help the people who are a little bit unsure about the guy. They don't necessarily know what they're supposed to do with him. I hope that this video was a big help to those of you who don't know what Prossh is. So anyway, you guys have a wonderful day. Void here signing off.